right, let's start the session. So, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, depending on which time zone you're joining us from. And a warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you so much for taking your time to join this session. And yes, we have people still joining in. So, meanwhile, the people who have already joined in, give me a hi in the chat box. Yes, so I have enabled the chat. So, give me a hi if let's test this chat functionality here. Give me a hi if you're excited to be part of this session. Thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. All right. So thank you again for joining us today. And my name is Soumya, and I have a pleasure of hosting this very special masterclass where our speaker Haricharan will walk you through this session. Um, Yes, Haricharan is an experienced senior executive with a strong international background in IT and business. So, proven track record in delivering successful software products and services across diverse industries with expertise in product management, business analysis, and sales. Right, so we have planned a special session to be very engaging and fun. So keep sending in your comments or any suggestions you have and the questions that you have so that we can answer them at the end of this session. Right. So, yeah, before we dive deeper to the session, let's take a moment to gauge our participants' familiarity with a very quick poll. I'm launching the poll for you all. Just give me a second. It's a very basic poll. Yes, here you go. So, your total work experience and where are you from? Which of the following certifications have you achieved and did you attend a safe POPM certification training before? So please take a moment to participate in this poll. Okay. All right. Okay. So 10 more seconds. All right. I think we can end the poll here. Thank you for the participation. Yes. Yes, Haricharan is over. The session is over to you now.
Yep. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in. I really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from whichever part of the world you're dialing in, right? So today's topic is a very interesting one, right? We're going to talk about working in global and distributed teams, especially in the context of implementing scaled agile. Now, this is a very tricky topic or subject because, as you're aware, when we do PI planning, we expect everybody to basically be available, to be part of the conversation in the same room physically, like, and given the world the way it has expanded today, everybody is now working in a remote setting, right? Almost remote or distributed setting. We have global teams all over the world. So we're going to see how this is affecting us and how we can leverage some of the best practices from organizations around the world, organizations that have mastered the art of remote working, have mastered the art of working with global and distributed teams, right? So let's talk about this, right? So if you've ever noticed this, right, you would notice that all around the world, across the globe, we now have specialty zones. Like, for example, India is a large, diverse talent pool. It's very economical for organizations to offload work to India, right? Similarly, Mexico It has large talent pool. It's very economical. Ireland has a very skilled workforce. It has a very low tax rate for corporates. Czech Republic is the offshoring country of choice for the European Union, right? Nigeria is another offshoring giant in the making, right? Singapore, very easy to launch a company, very investor friendly. As you can see, right? All these organizations are now beginning to slowly expand to other countries for a lot of other benefits that we know of, right? So what during the pandemic, what did we discover? We discovered that employees like that mobility, like that flexibility of remote work. And while businesses were really struggling with budgets not clear, and challenges of how do I measure somebody is somebody's productive or not, we had all those issues. But now, last 2 years, organizations are realizing that sometimes it is easier to embrace a distributed team model. It's easier to, possibly show some cost savings, show some increase in efficiency by actually recruiting people across the boundaries, maybe even open offices in other countries around the world, right? So now they're beginning to move across international borders, basically unlocking a lot of cost efficiencies. Now, in such a setup, right, what is happening is an organization called remote.com, right? They conducted a survey on the force report. And what they have identified or discovered is something very, very interesting. So they basically are saying that, just a minute, give me a second. Yeah, they're basically saying that distributed remote workforce are competitive advantage. They're saying that businesses are now looking for long-term advantages over short-term fixes in remote hiring. And businesses are overspending entities and offices when hiring abroad. Right? Which basically means that organizations are becoming more and more aware of where their money is going, and they want to be very conscious about how they're investing their resources in. Having said that, right, we also work in a world where there is rapidly growing knowledge. For example, what a person learned or knew in their entire lifetime in the 18th century is probably a bunch of newspaper pages in 2008. Today it is one Twitter feed, right? This endless stream of information. So the world is shrinking rapidly, knowledge is growing rapidly. At the same time, we also see org structures are also changing. Org structures were predominantly hierarchical, right? You had a head office, and then you had a regional office, and then you had individual offices, and they all report into one another, a very tree-like hierarchical structure. But if you look at today, if you look at organizations today, right, they are no longer following that kind of hierarchical model. It's a very nebulous model, right? Everybody's talking to everybody else. You have regional hubs, right? You have a mix of a hub and spoke model as well as a network model. Basically, all of them trying to communicate, get the maximum out of the structures that they already have. Now, it's a very interesting study. Okay, they say that when people are more than 50 feet apart, the probability of them collaborating more than once a week drops to almost 10%. That's a very interesting number. Why? Because there is hardly anybody. Then how do you collaborate then? We are all working in a distributed setting. Then that means the possibility of us collaborating is almost nil, because we will probably hardly ever meet, or meet probably once in a year, right? So we often collaborate only when we feel we are being seen, right? And that's going to be a challenge when we start going into the remote world of working, right? So assume that this is a picture, okay? Assume that this picture is basically a company which has offices across the world. So for example, it could be any of the giants that we know. For example, it could be an Oracle, it could be an Infosys, it could be a CTS, any of the big companies that they have offices, development centers across the world. Yeah. Now, each of these offices in turn is basically an amalgamation of multiple business units and departments within them. And each of these business units within them is again made up of multiple teams, which are all interacting with one another. Now imagine this, right? Like, so I hope you can see the complexity in this picture, that basically what is happening is the number of communication channels are exponentially increasing, which also means that the possibility of information being reported wrong is highly possible. At the same time, information overload is also high. So, and now I have lesser and lesser visibility into the original context. What was said earlier, 2 rooms earlier, maybe what was discussed at a CXO level trickles down to something else at a middle management level, becomes something else completely at a team level. So, number of communication channels can basically overwhelm teams and people. Now, remember that with whatever we have seen so far, we are now dealing with greater complexity, and we see less of that complexity, meaning we have less visibility into it, which means you don't know how bad things are until things become that bad. And all the while, we are having only second-hand information. Like, you don't have the up-to-date real-time information to make decisions. So in a world that works and looks like this, what are we going to do? Right? So there are a few key challenges or a few key themes associated with globally distributed teams. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 of these themes. Okay, we're going to talk about communication, we're going to talk about culture, we're going to talk about tooling and the technical stack, and we're also going to talk about team, which is all about cohesion and cadence and all of that stuff. Okay, so before we get started, I of course have a question for you, right? What are some of the key challenges in terms of communication whenever we encounter global and distributed teams, right? So I would want, I'm just launching the poll here. Okay, I'm launching the first poll. The first poll, you should be able to see it on your screen. It would be great if you all can vote on the poll. Okay, 40% people have, 60% people have voted. Fantastic. The others, if you could also participate, that would be lovely. Okay, 80% people have participated. Fantastic. 10 more seconds for the poll to end. If somebody has not answered the question, please do that. Excellent. I'm ending the poll here. Right now, let's look at what do I have to offer you, right? What is content, right? So some of the key challenges with respect to communication when you're dealing with these global and distributed teams are, first of all, a lack of transparency and visibility. I don't know what the other person is working on, what are their priorities, where are they coming from. I also have the other problem of misalignment, which is, they're not in this room, so I don't know what they're working on, so they're probably working on something else. I have communication delays. Why? Because I have time zone gaps. There's a large gap between somebody working in Singapore and whose office is in US. So there's probably, like a 4 or 5 hour gap, which is like nobody can basically cover that gap. Right? I also have Zoom fatigue and meeting fatigue. Like too many meetings. We are working in a global team, so which means, I'm meeting with people from 3 different zones all the time. Right? So when am I going to get the time to actually do my work? Right? And I also have the problem of Zoom fatigue, which is, I have to be on camera all the time. That's giving me, that's basically creating a lot of issues for me. On top of that, we have the cultural and language barriers. Some people are do not have English as their first language, so it makes it very difficult for them to communicate information sometimes, and that also has a cascading impact. Then of course there is lack of informal connection, meaning there is no let's go catch up on a coffee or let's go for lunch. There's nothing of that sort, especially when you are in a global distributed team setting. All your conversations are transactional. What I mean by transactional is, you want something, I'll give you something. You want X, I'll give you X. You want Y, I'll give you Y. There is no hi, hello. There's nothing, no running behind the scenes. So that basically is basically alienating us from that human side of the conversation. Then of course there are always distractions and multitasking, right? People are on a call while a meeting is happening, they're doing something else on the side. They're always distracted. And then there are, of course, the issues of managing talk time. Some people are more verbose on the call. Some teammates will dominate your discussions. Some don't even speak up. Some don't even have camera on. Right? And then, of course, you have the lack of non-verbal cues, meaning that it's very hard to read if the person is interested, not interested, is offended, not offended. And if you cannot see that person, or if you're not interacting with that person that closely, you will not be able to adjust your communication style as well. So with all these issues that exist in terms of communicating in a global setting, right? Let's look at what have organizations done to address this problem in a generic manner first. And then we will go into what we do in Scaled Agile in general. So let's look at what can be done to solve this problem, right? So my favorite line is actually, this is a small snippet from a company called GitLab, which is 100% remote. It works completely in a distributed setting. So what GitLab says is they have a small guidance. They ask a few questions. Am I using the best format for this question? Right? Am I supposed to be writing this question? Am I supposed to be asking this question? Is it supposed to be pictorially represented? Does the person receiving this message have all the context they need? Sometimes your words, you think that you are giving them the context, but sometimes the other person on the other hand does not know what has happened here. So you basically look like you're giving them information, but it's only half baked. Then am I communicating clearly so that there's no confusion? Am I considering the tone of my language and how this message will be received? Am I providing any resources or steps so that the other person can take action? And is it being documented so that it can be found later for a future reference? Yes, some questions that GitLab encourages their employees to ask themselves before they post a question or they post a message on the organization Slack, Teams, HipChat, email, any of the conversation tools that they have. This is just one example. Now let's look at how other companies have solved this problem, right? So when it comes to lack of transparency, how do we solve it? Companies like Microsoft and Atlassian, they have common status dashboards. They are basically common across the entire organization, right? You also have stand-ups for blockers. Whenever there is a blocker for any team, everybody comes together. We'll have a quick stand-up on what's blocking us, right? We have visibility of team calendars, which is very, very important, right? I need to know exactly what the other persons are working on. Usually, the calendars of almost everybody except the executives is open. So anybody can see what are the meeting slots and other people's calendars, and if they need to be part of it, they can request to be part of it. There's a question of misalignment, right? So for that, we solve that problem through OKRs. Amazon solves this problem through over communication, right? Atlassian also solves this problem through over communication. So Atlassian has a very simple rule that any information has to be communicated in at least 3 channels, right? It has to be email, there has to be instant messaging like your Slack or Teams, and of course it has to also be communicated on a call, right? Whenever you use if you're using Slack or Teams, if you use at all or at everyone, that's supposed to be, there's supposed to be a protocol for that. When do you use at, when do you use everyone, right? And of course you have core collaboration hours. We're going to talk about core collaboration hours in some time. We also have how do you solve the problem of meeting and Zoom fatigue? By having very clear agendas. We walk into a meeting with exactly what we want to accomplish from this meeting, and we walk away with exact action points. Similarly, we also have meeting free blocks, meaning that during these 4 hours or 5 hours of my day, I will not have any meetings, and people are expected to respect that. So for example, my slot could be between 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Between 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the evening, there will be no meetings on my calendar because I am focusing on some work. Right? There's some ways through which organizations communicate. Then there's other problem of cultural barriers. How do I solve this cultural barrier thing, right? So companies like SAP, IBM, Infosys, they all have cultural sensitivity workshops. So we basically talk about what are the cultures of the other companies, other organizations, other countries, and then we talk about how we are different from them and how we need to make sure that we are being inclusive, right? Similarly, when you're setting up new offices in other geographies, for example, if a company is setting up a new unit in some country, the best practice is to hire somebody who's local and not bring somebody from outside, right? Again, how do you bring about lack of connection? We have informal video channels where people can get in a video chat. How do you prevent distractions? For example, right now I'm using a background which is the KnowledgeHut's background, right? So that basically gives it a very professional look. We're all focused, we're having that etiquette here. And obviously we have, how do you remove talk time imbalance? We remove it through participation norms. Whenever somebody talks, we will make sure that they don't talk for more than 10 minutes. We give them time slots. We gently steer them away from the conversation. And of course, we always have video for visual cues, because if you have your video on, it gives you a good insight into, is the other person really listening to what I'm saying? Are they in sync with me? Can I do I need to change the topic? Do I need to ask them to listen to me again? These are some things that you can do as part of your communication uh, theme. But now, a few lessons from implementing SAFe. So as an SPC, I have implemented or I have run multiple projects in Scaled Agile model, and I feel a few important practices are useful, and I think they are worth sharing with the rest of the world. One of them is basically share first and sync later. Right? So the share first and sync later is basically the share first and sync later is basically a very interesting model that arrives from Atlassian Jira. Okay, so when I say Atlassian Jira, what I mean by that is it's basically a mandate that we will all work with transparency. Transparency is a safe core value that we have. Okay. Similarly, we also want to improve transparency through accessible documentation. We want to remove any information silos. So there should be no information that is kept, in certain some buckets. We want to avoid that. All documentation, emails, customer communication, product requirement documents, Jira tickets, Excel sheets, everything that you use for prioritization, they need to be shared upfront. And nobody is allowed to work on something in private. Like, you work on something on the side and then you just throw it as a surprise. We want to avoid that as much as possible. Yeah. This is basically the share first and sync later culture. Then we also talk about define collaboration hours across time zones. Right. So here what we do is teams will basically block some time and schedule meetings with teams in other geographical locations. Yeah. So some teams will block from between 90 minutes to 2 hours on their calendar, sometimes on an everyday basis, sometimes, on a basis of twice a week kind of a thing, where it is earmarked for collaboration and collaboration only. We will not do anything else. Any meetings that come in during this time will be summarily rejected or cancelled. Similarly, when we did this collaboration hours across time zones, what we also noticed was that the meetings also evolved in terms of the content, meaning that initially we started off talking, too much talking happened, and then slowly it became a more structured conversation, and then finally we started having video on in most of these meetings. That was essentially how we implemented some practices. Another thing that I want to highlight is alignment. Alignment is basically a core value in Scaled Agile, and in order to make sure that we are aligned, it is important to speak a common language, right? So in order to accommodate teams, what we did was we started having real-time translators on Zoom calls. So I've had experience of working with teams in Japan, where there's a person who's translating the content in Japanese. For people who are, when people are speaking in Japanese, it's translated to English, and people are speaking English, is translated to Japanese, right? And all important communication, especially on email, it would be usually bilingual or trilingual. Basically, it will be like 3 different languages or 2 different languages at the bare minimum. And all communication was expected to be direct and unambiguous. I was very particular about this because I did not want people to, read between the lines and try to assume that this is what they were trying to say. We won't use big words like expeditious action, swift resolution, unwavering attention. No, urgent. That's a word. We want to use simple words that basically communicate what is the problem. Yeah. Now, that was all about communication, right? So now I want to talk about culture, right? I want to run another poll. So if you can look at your screens, I'm going to run another poll, and I want to talk about culture. Okay. What do you think are the cultural challenges when you're dealing with global distributed teams? There's a small poll on your screen. If you could vote on that, that will be lovely. Okay, 40% people have answered. Fantastic. Twenty more seconds. Right. 60% people have participated. 80% people have participated. Fantastic. Okay, I'm ending the poll right now. Thank you. Okay, so now let's look at what's happening in the world in terms of the culture that we have. Right? Obviously, culture means different cultural norms and work styles require you to be empathetic. You need to have patience. You need to have adaptability. All of that, of course. And along with that, you need to be very careful with how you use certain terms, certain humor, some jokes. They don't land well, so you have to be very careful about how you make those jokes, right? So let's look at what other companies have done as part of their problem to solve culture, right? So Microsoft basically has many cultural education events. They also localize a lot of content and communication, right? Anything that is written as part of communication in Microsoft is translated into at least 17, 18 different languages, right? IBM and Infosys, they have extensive cultural training programs, right? They have employee resource groups like culture. So people who are interested in Japanese culture, there'll be a resource group that will deal entirely with that. Anybody interested in Spain, then you'll have a culture which is focused especially on Spanish culture, right? And of course, you have SAP. In SAP, we accommodate important holidays across the world. So when it is Diwali in India, I think 5 or 6 days holidays are taken into account when they're planning for something. Right? Similarly, when it's the Christmas, or the holiday season in the US, basically, the last 3 weeks are blocked off for US team, as no work will be done there. That's something interesting, right? So in Spotify, a few staff members, they keep rotating. So there'll be a few people who will work in one country, then they'll go to another country, and then you have the option of rotating staff members. Atlassian, they rotate the meeting times as well. So Atlassian has teams across the world. So sometimes meetings are conducted in the Australian time zone, sometimes meetings are conducted in the Singapore time zone, sometimes in India, sometimes in EMEA, and so on and so forth, right? At Zoom, the company Zoom, meetings are translated. Real-time translation happens, right? And of course, there are meeting free times that are part of Zoom's culture, right? Now, what do we take away from when we implement culture in scaled agile, right? Like when we're implementing safe, what are our takeaways? We talk about decentralized decision making, right? It's a safe principle where we want to give the teams the control and be accountable for some of the decisions. For example, how to merge code, when to merge code, right? When should people take off? What should be the approval policy for taking off, right? Even somebody taking off, who's going to be that person's backup, right? We want all those decisions to be taken by the teams, not by their managers. So we want to bring in that culture of teams owning it, extreme ownership as a result of decentralization. Similarly, there's a culture that we talk about in terms of embracing risk, right? We want to have short cycles. We want to have rapid learning, because shorter cycles means faster feedback loops. I get something out to market in 1 week, fantastic. I get the customer feedback, fantastic. I implement it, fantastic. It's a rapid learning cycle. Similarly, I want to have a culture where there is a lot of focus on failure as a teacher rather than failure as something to avoid. So it's all about failing fast and learning faster. So that's also a safe core value that we talk about. And allowing failure in pursuit of innovation. Obviously, when you're in the pursuit of innovation, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. A lot of experiments are going to fail. Only a few of them would turn out to be successful. And you have to be tolerant, and you have to be acceptable to that. That's basically what we talk about when you talk about culture in implementing safe. Yeah. Now we come to the next theme, right? So we talked about two themes. One is communication, the other one is culture. Now I'm entering into the third theme, which is all about tooling and tech stack. Let's talk about tooling and tech stack. It's going to be a very interesting one, actually. Okay. So I'm launching another poll for you. This is poll number 3. And I want you to talk to me about what do you think are some of the challenges that you see when you're dealing with, in terms of tooling, when you're dealing with global and distributed teams. Yeah. So you have the survey on your screen. You may take it up now. 60% people have participated. We great, others can also participate. Yeah, I just ended the poll here. Fantastic. Now let's talk about what happens in the tooling and tech stack, right? So it's very important to note that we have to align on common tools and systems, otherwise it's going to be a big challenge. And of course, there are more tech challenges with distributed networking systems. So what are some of the challenges that we see, right? First of all, we see a lot of fragmented tooling. Basically, platforms that are not scalable, and then you see a lot of lack of integration. What do you mean by that, right? So when you start off small, every country, every team has their own set of tools. They're mostly free tools, or mostly freemium tools that they try to they try to coordinate, integrate together. They basically end up creating data silos, and they have a lot of workflows that are very inefficient. And these tools are mostly suited for startups, not for enterprises, right? Which means they have less features around access control, administration of these tools. All of these are missing. I find global distributed teams sometimes have no central repository for work or information, right? Important information is often scattered across multiple tools, right? Then you have inconsistent access. If I want to access something which the US team is using, suddenly I find that I have network restriction. I need to have multi-factor authentication. I will get a secure ID token and all of that stuff, right? Then I also have technical difficulties from distributed infrastructure. If I wanted to access a server which is sitting in the US office, or maybe somewhere in other geographies, I have a lot of issues. There's a lot of latency, right? Then there is also the challenge of regional variations in security protocols. Some organizations will require you to have MFA. Some countries do not require you to have MFA, right? Data privacy, data compliance. You also have the gap usage between tools. What do you mean by gap usage? Meaning a tool, what it's capable of doing versus how we are using the tool, right? So you're not getting the maximum out of those tools. Then you also have licensing limitations. There are only certain people who can use like certain tools. Then there is a limitation of how many people can use those tools. All of them contribute to this problem. And then of course you have these tech support challenges, because it becomes harder and harder to provide tech support when your team is globally distributed. So let's talk very quickly about what is it that we can do, or what the world is doing to solve these kind of problems. So we have the problem of fragmented tooling, right? So what do? We try to reduce the number of tools in use. We call it SaaS sprawl, meaning a number of applications are all spreading all over the world. We want to reduce the total number of tools in use. We also want to prioritize enterprise ready tools. We don't want to purchase a tool which is kind of like startup friendly and then struggle to scale it, right? We want to have workflow interoperability as a fallback mechanism, meaning in the worst case that two different teams are using two different tools, at least I should be able to export the data from one team and use it in the tool on the other team. So what is the minimum interoperability I need? I need to find that out. Then I also want to talk about lack of generalization. I want to have my documents in a common knowledge base. I want to maintain a searchable team-wide wiki. I want to have single source of truth tools. For example, Jira could be a single source of truth tool, where everything that is in Jira is the latest and the greatest, right? Then of course you have inconsistent access. So what do? We use good tools like single sign-on and identity management providers, which basically means that you can access any tool in the enterprise with one click, right? And we also have other technical difficulties, meaning you can improve your IT monitoring services, and you can also move to cloud-based tools wherever possible. In terms of security and compliance, you can always build compliance requirement into the procurement process, meaning that whenever you're acquiring new tools or acquiring new vendors, you can make sure that they are compliant by default. And you also want to enable regional customization of tools in terms of language, in terms of settings, in terms of budgets, right? We really want to avoid using tools that are unreliable. So which means you need to do a proper piloting of these tools. Then of course, we have to incentivize teams for using these tools. Very, very important, right? I know a lot of teams which are hesitant to use Jira. They use Excel sheets to manage their work because Jira, they find Jira to be, X, Y, and Z reasons. What if we incentivize them to use Jira, incentivize and reward the adoption of a tool, right? And then of course, we always have licensing limitations. So that can be resolved through buying global licenses or basically flex licensing, what we call as flex. For example, by default, you'll be given 50 free licenses, and anything more than that would be billed at a nominal price. There are a lot of options available for people to buy today. Then of course, you have support challenges. How do you address support challenges? You could solve these support challenges by hiring dedicated distributed and IT support teams. Now that's obviously it will involve a lot of expenditure. So if you want to control that, you could basically talk about a time zone based help center, meaning that whoever is living in the time zone of for example GMT plus or minus 3 hours will be served from this location, or there's a help center for that particular location. And then of course you also have self-help knowledge bases. So if you have good documentation for all the tooling that we have, then the need for support would also come down rapidly. Now, for all these tooling and tech stack best practices that we have seen here, right? Let's talk about what can we do or what do we do in leading safe, like in implementing safe. What do we do, right? So my preferred thing is using a centralized tool for task management, and usually it is like something like at least in Jira or Azure DevOps or Asana or ClickUp. This is basically like a tool that is used across the entire organization, right? There is no two way about it. Nobody can use some other tool. We are all going to use the same tool, same data, same transparency, right? And then also you have tools to help you execute what we call as PI planning. PI planning is nothing but planning interval planning. It's a major event in implementing safe. So you can do Miro integration. Miro is a tool, again, collaboration tool. So you can integrate Miro with Jira and ADO. You also have piplanning.io, which was recently acquired by Safe. It has bidirectional sync, meaning you make changes in piplanning.io and it will reflect in Jira and vice versa. Right? There's also a tool called kendis.io, which also has bidirectional sync. Now, apart from this, what else can you do? Before every PI planning event, I normally set up a Google Drive folder or like a SharePoint folder where people will drop in all the assets required for the planning event. It could be Excel sheets, it could be PowerPoint templates, it could be prioritization matrices, whatever they need. One other thing that I do very frequently is I do a dry run of a PI planning event with the tooling intact. So for example, if I'm using a tool, like say, for example, at least in Jira or piplanning.io, I make sure I run a dry run of the planning event with the tooling, so that it gives me a good sense of what are the challenges people are going to be facing when they start adopting or when they start doing PI planning on the ground. Yeah. Now, we talked about tooling and tech stack. Now we're also going to talk about teams and what are the challenges that we see with teams. So I'm going to open up another poll very quickly. This is the fourth poll that we're launching. Yeah. And I think you should see it on your screen now. This poll is more about what do you think are major challenges when it comes to teams that are global and distributed. Okay. You'll see a poll on your screen. Please answer the poll. Okay, 60% people have participated. Anybody else trying to answer? Okay, so I'll end the poll here. Okay, and let's get back to our slide, right? So what happened here, right? Let's talk about this. So if you notice, what are the challenges that we have with teams? There's a lack of trust and relationship building, right? We have cultural boundaries, we have geographical boundaries. We find it very difficult to build trust. We also have no sense of shared identity. We are one team. That is missing, right? I also see a lot of unplanned interactions, right? There are no unplanned interactions. Everything is very planned. Everything is scheduled on the calendar, which makes it very clinical, which makes it very formal, very official, right? We also have cross-cultural misunderstandings. We think and assume some things about other people. We have collaboration challenges. We don't know how to use tools, or maybe we are not able to, we are not compatible with other people's styles of working. You have onboarding difficulties, right? It's very hard for new team members to come together, understand what's happening around them, who are the people I'm dealing with, right? Team events will start losing their impact. Retro used to be a very fun event, but now retros have become very boring. You see in general, teams start losing their engagement, right? So you slowly start, they start distancing themselves from the conversations. They're not interested in talking. So what's the challenge there? What are we doing to solve this problem, right? So in general, companies like Automatic and GitLab, they have shared rituals. Lack of trust is resolved by shared rituals. So there are certain things that the teams will do together. For example, code review will always be done together with the team, right? And releases will always be done together. So whenever release is happening, the entire team is on call together to address the concern. We also have the concept of uh, uh, team charters. Team charters and team spaces are basically online spaces where people will set up their photograph. They'll put in some bio about them, what they like, what they do not like, something like a small profile about them, where anybody who joins the team can look at it and get to know, okay, these are the people that I'm working with, these are their preferences, this is what they like, this is their background looking like. And we talked about cross-cultural gaps. So we already spoke about having cultural training, right? IBM, SAP, Infosys, they all have cultural training. My other favorite one is the one that Spotify uses, called regional buddies. So you will be assigned a buddy in another region who will be able to guide you on certain cultural aspects of it. Like, this is how, for example, I had a buddy who was on the Japanese side. So when I'm talking in a meeting, he would basically, give me advice on the side that how do you talk in a meeting? How do you communicate this information to a team in a meeting versus how do you communicate this information to a manager in a meeting? So what are the differences? What are subtle differences in terms of, putting a word here and there? How does it help you? All of that is basically cross-cultural gap. Then in terms of collaboration challenges and unplanned interactions, right? We have conducted workshops on styles. Styles as in, what is the style of working? What are some styles that managers like to work? What is the style of working of people who come from a particular geographical background, right? For example, US people will have a certain style, right? People from Argentina might have a different style. What are those styles? In terms of resolving onboarding difficulties, we have welcome rituals. Like, we'll do like a proper company wide virtual tour. We will basically send out emails to the entire company, right? All these are basically to help people come on board, feel part of the big picture, right? Then of course, in the events, wherever we feel like team events have lost their importance, right, what do? We basically rotate the leaders. The core rituals remain the same, but the formats are changed every now and then to make it very fresh, right? And we also have post-event recaps. So it's very popular at Salesforce. After an event happens, there is a proper congregation where we talk about how do we walk away from this event with some feedback. Then of course, comes the challenge of disengagement. Are employees really engaged with what we do? Are they disengaged? Are they really connected with our mission, vision, purpose? So for that, you conduct it. Microsoft and SAP do pulse surveys. There's a standardized NPS that they use. NPS meaning, would you recommend working here, or would you ask your friends to come and work with us? Right? That's basically like a signal to indicate that people like working here. People want to work here. And then, of course, you also measure their productivity through contributions, participation in meetings. They're all proxies for engagement. This was from a team's perspective. So how do you handle teams in a scaled agile or a setting, right? We talk about my favorite tool that I use is Zoom. So in Zoom, we have a concept of breakout rooms. So what we do is, when there are about 80-90 people inside a Zoom call, we set up over 10 to 12 breakout rooms, and at random intervals, we will keep changing the breakout room for people. So this would mean that every time the breakout room reopens, you would be in a fresh group with a fresh bunch of people, and we'll ask them to do a quick introduction about themselves. So I usually run this before PA planning event, so that it breaks the ice and makes everybody comfortable and they start talking. Similarly, you also have what we call as team charter and team spaces, which basically every team has a wiki or a tool where they will put their photo, their bio, very useful for newcomers to familiarize themselves with what they are doing. Then, of course, you can also look at team morale using iteration retro points. So we use a lot of retro data points to understand, is the team having the right morale? Are we overloading the team? Are we expecting too much from the team? And we also have pulse surveys and mid-PI checkpoints. Very, very important. You want to keep checking if the team is engaged. Are we all on the same line? Are we all talking about the same thing? Are we on the same page? How are we feeling? Are we feeling motivated? Are we feeling engaged, energized? Those are questions asked in surveys and assessed. Right? These are some tips and tricks that we use for managing teams when you're trying to implement SAFe. Right? Now comes the more important part. We're coming towards the end of the slides from my end. We're talking about why Scaled Agile, right? Scaled Agile is literally twice as popular as any other framework in the market. Okay, it has moved from 37% adoption in 2021 to over 53% adoption in 2022. Right? And similarly, Scaled Agile is basically, it's a new way of working. People are used to a very hierarchical traditional way of working. SAFe 6.0 basically is a new way of working. We have teams, we have team of teams, we have solution trains, we have portfolios, we manage work through multiple cadences and a lot of sync. We have a lot of core values, we have principles. All of this is essentially one package structure, right? There are 4 SAFe core values we talk about. One of them is alignment, one of them is transparency, one of them is relentless improvement, and the fourth one is respect for people. And if you notice, today in this webinar, we've covered aspects from all 4 of them. We talked about alignment, we talked about transparency, we talked about relentless improvement, we also talked about respect for people. Okay? And then, of course, as you're all aware, SAFe has a lean agile mindset, which is basically we adopt policies, we adopt the lean thinking principles as well as the agile values. We bring them together to come to our what we produce as a lean agile mindset. SAFe has its own set of 10 principles, which are described in detail. Whenever you attend your leading agile class or an implementing SAFe class, you would notice that these 10 principles are discussed in detail. We talk about how these add value, and these are time-tested principles and practices. Right? Of course, there's a SAFe implementation roadmap. So when you go for implementing SAFe, you talk about this implementation roadmap, which starts with a very, very, very interesting term at the top that says reach the tipping point. And we talk about conducting a SAFe executive workshop. And from there, you basically train your lean agile change agents, you train your managers and executives, you organize around value, you train your people, you prepare for art launch, you train the teams, you conduct your PA planning event, you coach the ART execution, you launch more trains, and then finally you move faster and you keep accelerating. Right? These are the steps in terms of implementing SAFe. Right? SAFe Scaled Agile offers many courses across multiple roles, and if you're interested in them, you can reach out to the Knowledge Hut team, and they'll be more than happy to guide you on the choice of your program. And we also have role-based learning curve, meaning that you can do scale leading safe first, and then you can move on to implementing safe. You can talk about product owner, product manager. You can talk about agile product management. We can talk about RTE, scrum masters. You can see how the journey progresses in terms of their learning curve. Yep. With that, I come to the end of my presentation, handing off to Sandhya now.
Yes, thank you, Haricharan. It was a very insightful session. So, yeah, let me tell you why you should choose KnowledgeHut as as your safe learning partner. So, yes, KnowledgeHut is now a Gold SPCT partner of Scaled Agile. And being a Gold SPCT partner means that KnowledgeHut has established a strong partnership with Scaled Agile and is recognized as a trusted provider of safe training and consulting, right? And KnowledgeHut has achieved a high level of proficiency in delivering safe services and is recognized as a trusted provider in the safe ecosystem. And yes, we have highly certified and experienced consultants, advanced capability to deliver safe training, and extensive safe consulting experience, and continuous improvement and contribution to safe community, and exceptional customer satisfaction, right? And here the numbers speak. We have 300 plus agile transformation facilitated, top, and KnowledgeHut is top 10 global scaled agile training provider in 100 plus countries and still counting, and 100 plus years of collective experience in agile transformation, 250,000 plus professionals trained in agile and scrum, and 650 plus top trainers across the globe. And we have 7,000 plus reviews from alumni the world over, and you can see the ratings below. Yes, so KH has a workforce management, is the advanced we have more than 450,000 plus alumni, and 4,500 plus enterprise partners across 100 plus countries, right? So this is another key differentiator, guys, for KnowledgeHut is the advanced immersive hands-on AI based learning platform, which is known as Prism. So no other company comes close to what Prism has to offer. So features like cloud labs, where you can practice within your browser, and there is no need for get additional software as well, and the real-time insight that learners get, so they can improve in their weaknesses, and which makes us stand out from the crowd. And yes, so the people who are in the session today, you will have this exclusive bonuses for you. You'll get a lifetime access and complimentary gift of worth rupees INR 2150, and you'll have a 30 minutes one-on-one slots with a safe expert, right? So yes, this is what I was telling the previous slide. Free gift worth rupees 2158. This course includes 8 hours of on-demand videos, 13 auto-graded assessments, 11 assignments, 13 recall quizzes, and 13 ebooks. So what are you waiting for? You go and get enrolled now. Yes, so do we have any questions now? If you have any questions, we can answer them for sure now. You can text in the Q&A window or in the chat option. I'll read it out for you guys. Any questions, or if you want to talk, you can raise your hand as well. I will allow you to talk. In a couple of more seconds, the questions coming in. If there are no questions coming in, I think we are good to wrap the session, Haricharan.
Sure, works actually. Yeah.
Oh yes, I think we do not have any questions coming in. So thank you so much for everyone for okay, I think we have a chat question. All right. Thank you so much for everyone. we'll see you in the next sessions. And if you have any questions regarding the course, you can reach out to us. And yes, cheers, everybody. See you in the next sessions. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Haricharan. Yeah.